Hello class, good day to you all. You are welcome to the first semester GSP course GSP 2205, Philosophy and Logic, in the session 2020-2021. The lectures will be taught by Abdulhadi Muhammad Hamza. Now, considering the title of the lecture of the course, Philosophy and Logic, the course is subdivided into 8 different modules. The first 4 modules of this course is the philosophy part, while the last 4 module is the logic part. For the logic part comprise of module 5, 6, 7 and 8, which our lectures today will be centered only on module 5, titled Logical Terms, Laws of Thought, Nature and Fundamental Principle of Logic. Let's start by the wise saying of one of our great philosophers, that is St. Thomas, which said that logic is to be learned before any other science. So let's define what is a logic. Okay, from what our great philosopher says, logic must be learned before any other science. So then, what is a logic? A logic is a non-empirical science of reasoning, or we can define logic as a science or study of careful reasoning by formal method. That's what Longman Dictionary says. And a Webster Dictionary defines logic as a science of pure reasoning, a way of reasoning or arguing. And also an encyclopedia defines logic as a field of study dealing with the criteria for evaluating of an argument. That's what encyclopedia defines logic as. And also the great scientist, that is Ivan Copy, in 1982 defined logic as a science or art of making a distinction between straight and crooked reasoning. So, looking at these 5 different definitions of logic, now we can say that a logic is nothing but a study of the principles and methods used in distinguishing valid arguments from those that are invalid. That's what we can say about the definition of logic. Now, what is the building block of logic? So, without a self-statement, there is no logic, because if you look at the definition of the encyclopedia, they said dealing with the criteria for evaluating an argument. So how can we form an argument? If I just keep quiet without talking, there is no way we can have an argument. So the building block of logic is a statement. So what is a statement? Okay, since we said that a building block of logic is a statement, then what forms of statement are we referring to? Here we refer to as a statement, which are also refers to as proposition. Then what is a proposition? A proposition is a declarative sentence, and a declarative sentence is a sentence which is either true or false, but not both. So any statement which which are declarative in nature, we call that that sentence or that statement as a logical statement. And we have two types of proposition. We have simple proposition and a compound proposition. A simple proposition is a proposition of the form which we have a simple statement, like example 1, Kano is in Nigeria. Jigawa is a local government in Kano. 2 plus 2 is equal to 5. Buke is in Nigeria. All these 4 examples are a logical statement. Why? Because we can identify those statements as either true or false. But if we cannot identify a sentence which is either true or false, then that sentence is not a logical sentence. A simple example of not logical sentence is a command, exclamation mark, a request, or a sentence which we lack information about. Example, the sky is rich. Come to our party. How are you, Ali? How are you? It's a question. Come to our party is a request. If I said, go out from my class, it's a command. And all these are statements, but they are statements which are not logical in nature. So if you look at clearly, if you look at example 1, 2 are examples which are clearly true. And if you look at example 2, 3 are examples which are clearly false, while example 4, 5 and 6 are not even logical sentences or logical statements. So now looking at the simple proposition, we can form or we can define what we mean by a compound proposition. A compound proposition is a proposition constructed or formed by combining two or more simple propositions by using some logical terms. Then when we said by some logical terms, by the use of some logical terms, then what do we mean by the logical terms? So that's what brings about the logical terms, and this is what brings our first title of our lectures today, the logical terms. Okay, class, since the first subtitle of our Module 5 is on logical term, so let us know what are logical terms. But the answer to this question appears to be difficult to answer because there is no universal agreement on what are logical terms. Because any term that cannot stand on its own can be a logical term. Example, we can say so, therefore, there exists, not, or, and, if. All these are logical terms. Why? Because these words cannot stand on its own. And these kind of words are what we call syncagrammatic terms. The terms that doesn't have meaning on its own, unless if the word is attached to some logic, to some statement. So now, from this explanation, we can say that we can give 5 or at least the basic logical term to consider in our modules. So the basic logical terms are negation, disjunction, conjunction, conditional, and biconditional. When we said negation, negation is, we normally used to denote it in English as not, and disjunction is normally represented O, and conjunction we represent it by and, while conditional is sometimes called implication statement. O and biconditional statement is also called a by implication statement. By to, that is if and only if. So this kind of statement are what we call the five basic logical terms. And all these five logical terms, we said that they are syncagrammatic terms. They don't have meaning on its own unless they are attached to some statement. So now let's define all these five basic logical terms. So class, let's define the five basic logical terms, and let's start with the negation. Since negation is a logical term, it does not have meaning. It doesn't have meaning on its own. Therefore, let P be a statement. If P is a statement, then negation of P, which is symbolically represented as in your lecture notes, and is represented and is defined, or it can be read as not P, and is defined as if P is true. If a statement P is true, then P is false, and if a statement P is false, then negation of P is true. The meaning of this is, when I take one of the examples that we treat, like BUK is in Nigeria, it's a statement. If I said what is the negation of that sentence, we can say that BUK is not in Nigeria. The use of not in a sentence is what we call the negation. And we can say the truth value of a negation is always the opposite of the original value of the statement. That's what we mean by negation. And disjunction, POQ, which is symbolically represented as also in your lecture note or as in the slide here, is defined as if a statement, if we are given two sentences or two statements, P and Q. If P is true or Q is true, or both P and Q are true, then P or Q is always true. But otherwise, P or Q is false. What we mean by otherwise P is false, it means that when I have a sentence which is both P and Q are both false, then false or false is always a false. But when I have a combination of true and false, or false and true, or true and true, the answer will automatically be true, because is or disjunction is just like an option given to you to choose between the true sentences and the false sentences, just like the option given to you. And when we have a conjunction, which we call and, P and Q, still we need to have two sentences because they are syncagrammatic terms. All these five basic logical terms are syncagrammatic terms. They don't have meaning on their own. So that's why we need to have a word or a sentence or a statement which will be attached to it. If I said P and Q, which is symbolically represented as also in your lecture note or as in the slide here, and is defined as when a statement P is true and a statement Q is also true, then P and Q is always true. Otherwise, it is P and Q is false. What do we mean by otherwise P and Q are false? Whenever a sentence, like example that we gave in the previously, when we said 2 plus 2 equals to 5, and when we said also BUK is in Nigeria, if you look at that sentences, 2 plus 2 equals to 5 and BK is in Nigeria. One is false, one is true, because false and because conjunction is called and. False, true, and false is always false. Why? Because sometimes if you are interacting or if you are changing your sentences day and day or day and night, sometimes you say true, sometimes you say false, automatically you will become a liar. Why? Because no condition, there is no way someone can be changing his words. Today you say something and tomorrow you said another thing. So that's what we define conjunction as. So conjunction indirectly is only true when a sentence P is true and Q is true. So the conjunction of true statement is true only if each component is what? Is true. Likewise, when we discuss disjunction, we said disjunction of two sentences is false only if the component is false. So class, having defined or understand what we mean by negation, implication, disjunction, and conditional sentences. So let's also consider another important logical term, that is conditional sentence or implication sentence, because some conditional sentences, or we can call it implication sentences, are sentences which is symbolically represented as in your slide and also in your lecture notes, and also can be read as, and we can read it as P implies Q, or we can say if P then Q. This is not the only way of saying P implies Q, but here I pick some few examples. When you go to the lecture note, you will see a lot of different ways of writing conditional sentences. And a conditional sentence is a sentence which is always true unless if P is true and Q is what? False, then therefore we automatically have a false sentence. Or in another word, we said that in another word, P implies Q state that a true sentence can, or a true statement can never imply a false sentence. Some will say, what of if false implies a false? And the answer is going to be true. I know there is a lot of question here. Many people will ask why false implies false will always be true. Because now, let me give you an example here. If I'm a good liar, assume, take an example, I'm a good liar, and this guy also, he's a good liar, and we come to dist, or we come to move to somewhere. If I'm lying to him, he knows me as a good liar, and I know him also as a good liar. A good liar, or a good liar, yes. So now the typical example of that, whenever I will say to him, it must be true, even if that sentence, it must be a true sentence that I will say to him, because he knows me as a good liar and I know him as a good liar. Whatever sentence that he will alter me a true sentence, because I know him as a liar, he knows me as a liar. So whenever we want to just, the word that will come out from our mouth must be a good, or must be a true sentence. So that is the typical example of if P is if false implies what? A false. And we have so many different forms of that conditional sentences. We have combus, we have imbus, and we have contrapositive. The combus of a sentence P implies Q, which can be written as Q implies P, and the inverse of a sentence P implies Q can be written as negation of P implies negation of Q. And also the contrapositive of a sentence is if negation of Q implies negation of Q. Or if I will give an example here, if now I take BUK is in Nigeria, BUK is in Nigeria, and also I take another letter, I represent this BUK is in Nigeria as P, and I represent another sentence 2 plus 2 is equals to 5. If I want to give you a simple example of combus, inverse, and contrapositive, so if P implies Q is our sentence, our P is BUK is in Nigeria, our Q is 2 plus 2 equals to 5. So I will now say if BUK is in Nigeria, then 2 plus 2 is equals to 5. But if I want to give the converse of that sentence, I would say if 2 plus 2 equals to 5, then BUK is in Nigeria. Or if I want to give the inverse of that sentence, I will say that because negation of P is BUK is not in Nigeria, then I will say if BUK is not in Nigeria, then 2 plus 2 is not equals to 5. And the contrapositive of that sentence, we will say that if 2 plus 2 is not equals to 5, then BUK is not in Nigeria. That is the simple, and there is a lot of examples also given for this converse, inverse, and contrapositive given in your lecture note. So once you go through your lecture note, you will see that there is a lot of explanation explained for the forms of conditional statements. Okay, class, for the biconditional sentences, any which we symbolically represent it as also written in your lecture note and also written on that slide, which is, you can see it all, and it's a statement of the form if P, or we can read it as P if and only if Q, because we need to have two or more simple sentences, two or more simple statements. So if P, and we can define it as if P and Q have the same truth value, then P if and only if Q is also true. But if P and Q have opposite values, then P and Q is true. That is the simplest way of representing a biconditional sentences or by implication sentences. And sometimes we can represent it with the use of conditional sentences as if P implies Q and Q implies P. Sometimes there are ways of defining biconditional sentence, and the other way of defining biconditional sentence is this: P implies Q, and we have to use the word and here. That is conjunction. And Q implies P. It means we have we have P implies conditional and the converse and the normal implication sentences. And there are some sentences which are called a tautological sentence, a contradictional sentence, a contradictory sentences, and contingency sentences. A tautology is a compound statement that is always true, no matter what the truth value or of the proposition that occur in it. And a contradictory sentence is a compound sentence that is always false, no matter what the truth value of the proposition that occur in it. And also contingency is a proposition which is neither true, which is neither a tautology nor a contradiction. Or maybe sometimes some people will say this tautology and this contradiction is not clear. We gave a full detail of what we mean by a contradiction and a tautology and even contingency in our lecture notes. But still here, let's explain a little bit more what we mean by tautology. If I have a truth table, because whenever you have a truth table, we can have a truth value for P, a truth value for Q, and we can have a truth value for maybe P implies Q, or maybe P if and only if P, or maybe P and Q. So when the last column or the last answer of these sentences is all true, That is what we mean by tautology. And when the last column of your truth table is all false, is what we call a contingency. And when we have the mixture of the two, that's what we call a contingency sentence. That you said is neither tautology nor contradiction. So class, let us consider another sub-heading of our model, that is a law of thought or laws of thought. A laws, first let's see what we mean by these laws. Laws are considered as a rule that guides everyone's thinking, thoughts, expression, and decision. So Aristotle also gave a necessary condition for thoughts. And these necessary conditions for thought that Aristotle gives them as a laws. That is, there are three laws of thought from the perspective of Aristotle. The first one of the law says we have law of identity. The second one is called the law of non-contradiction. And the third one is law of excluded middle. So when we said law identity law or laws of identity or principle of identity, all this can be called laws of identity. It states that A is always A, or in another word, everything is the same as itself. That is, if I'm a man, I will forever be a man, and if I'm a woman, I will forever be a woman. Or if I'm a human being, I will remain as human being forever. And also, considering this type of example, if I said 3 minus 2 equals to 1, if what number 3 represent have the same identity with what number 2 represent, then 2 minus 1 is 3 minus 2 is always 1 represent. So that's what we mean by the identity law. And by law of non-contradiction, the law says that nothing can both be and not be at the same time in the same sense. The simple or example of this statement is, if I'm in this class, I will never be out of this class. Or if I am the same person, if I'm in this class, I will never be in another class in the same time and in the same sense. That's what they said. Ali is in Nigeria, Ali is not in Nigeria. Cannot both be true in the same context. So it means that whenever Ali is in Nigeria, the same Ali will never be in maybe Niger, unless if the Ali that we are referring here is another Ali which is not in Nigeria. So that is what we mean by law of non-contradiction. And also law of excluded middle, which said that every statement is either true or false. In fact, we even call this the law as a principle of every proposition. But somebody who said, we said every statement. We mean here, the statement that we mean here is the logical sentences, because there are some sentences which we said like a command and command, question, exclamation mark. All these are not or request. All these are not logical statements. So the statement that we mean here, the statement which are propositional, which are declarative in nature, which we can identify as true or false sentence. All right, class. I hope you are following what we are saying about the logical term, the laws of thought, and now the last part of the lecture, which is the nature and the fundamental principle of logic. In the previous slide, or in the first slide, we define what we mean by a logic. as a study and principle used in distinguishing between valid arguments from those that are invalid. So an argument here is simply defined as a collection of statements and a conclusion. Statements, collection, or a sequence of a statement with a what? With a conclusion. The statement here we call it a proposition, and the conclusion we call it a conclusion. Also, that conclusion is a statement from the premises. Therefore, a premises and the conclusion are separated by either phrase or marks or commas. Example of an argument is, if you study hard, then you will pass an examination. All these are premises. You study hard. It's another premises. So you can pass. So you pass GSP 2205. This is also clearly the conclusion. So now, if I ask you from here, give me because we have two forms of premises. We have minor premises and the major premises. Look at this example. Looking at this example, what you will see, if you look at, we said that if you study hard, so it means if I can let P to be, you study hard. I can let Q to be, you will pass GSP 2205. And I can let also this, and I can also, we have another sentence which we can let it to be R. Then we said that you study, you can pass GSP 2205. So looking at these sentences, there are minor premises and we have the major premises. Look at the premises here. You study hard. You will pass GSP 2205. There are two sentences with a conclusion, collection of statement with a conclusion. So now, this word is what makes a simple argument. Some words that can identify, and we have some of the words which, when we saw that word, we can easily identify them as words which identify a conclusion. The simple example of that word is when we said therefore, hence, so, in conclusion. All these are examples that immediately the word that comes after that word is what we term as the conclusion of an argument. So that's what we mean by a simple term argument. Okay, class, since argument is a collection or is a sequence of a statement with the conclusion, and we said that not all arguments are valid, so we need to identify the principle that will ensure the validity of that argument. For an argument to be valid, first, the argument must satisfy the laws of thought, and in addition, an argument needs to satisfy the following fundamental principles. The first one is no argument with all premises but has a false conclusion is valid. The second one, if an argument has all premises but has a false conclusion, then it is invalid. If an argument is valid, then every argument with the same form is also valid. And also the last one, if an argument is valid, then every argument with the same form also is invalid. So these four are the four fundamental principles of logic. And now we can also we can determine the nature of an argument by considering these four fundamental principles. So also, class, the nature of an argument is either valid or invalid.
but it is possible for an argument to have all true premises and a true conclusion, and some false premises and a true conclusion, and also all false premises and a true conclusion, and also a valid argument can have all false premises and a false conclusion. But when we note that it is not possible for a valid argument to have all true premises and a false conclusion. So it means that when an argument have all these four characteristics, then the argument can be a valid argument. But when an argument fails to have all these four characteristics, then the argument, we can call that argument to be an invalid argument. So that is all about the nature of an argument. And in the previous slide, we gave you the nature and the fundamental principle of an argument. But here, we gave you how to identify the nature of a given argument. So that is all about nature and the fundamental principle of an argument. So thank you for listening the lecture note on Module 5. And I hope when you go through the lecture notes, you will have, I'm expecting to have so many questions, because in the lecture note there is a lot of exercises which when you go through, when you have any problem, when we go to the live interactive session on the module learning class, then you will contact me or you will ask the question concerning logical term, laws of thought, and nature and fundamental principle of logic. Once again, thank you for listening. I'm Abdulhadi Muhammad Hamza.